it is chewed, hardly ever decomposes, but on the contrary becomes still more elastic. This mastic was also invented by a certain being with good reason, who belonged to one of the old Asiatic communities. The use of chewing this keva consists in this, that by chewing it, much of what is called there on earth saliva, and also other substances are formed in beings, which are worked out by their planetary bodies so that their first being food may be the better and more easily transformed in them, or as they themselves say, so that this food may be the better and more easily digested and assimilated. Thanks to this keva, their teeth are also strengthened, and the cavities in their mouths too are cleaned from the remains of the first food. The use of keva is very necessary for your favorites, particularly for this second purpose, as these remains, not decomposing owing to the chewing of keva, do not give off that disagreeable odor from their mouths, which has already become proper particularly to the contemporary three-brained beings there. And the second custom, namely the washing at times in special rooms of theirs called the hammam, was also invented by a certain ancient Asiatic being. In order clearly to understand the necessity for this second custom in the process of the existence of terrestrial beings, the following must be first explained to you. The functioning of the planetary body of beings of all forms of external coatings is adapted by nature in general in such a way that the process of their nourishment, with the second being food, which your favorites call breathing of air, proceeds in them, and this nourishment is taken in not only through the organs of breathing, but also through what are called the pores present in their skin. Through the pores of the skin of the beings, not only the new second being food enters, but also through several of these pores, after the transformation of this second being food, those parts of this food are given off from the skin, which are either no longer necessary for the planetary body of the beings, or which are already the result of its transmutation. These unnecessary parts should be given off from the said pores of the skin of beings by evaporating gradually by themselves, thanks to those factors which obtain from the process proceeding in that sphere itself where the given beings exist, as for instance from the movement of the atmosphere, from accidental contacts, and so on. Now, when your favorites invented the covering of themselves with what are called clothes, then, since these clothes of theirs began to hinder the normal elimination of evaporation of those parts of the second being food unnecessary for the planetary body, these unnecessary substances having no possibility of evaporating into space, and at the same time always continuing to accumulate, they, condensing, begin to form in these various pores of their skin the accumulation of a certain oily something. From that time on, among a number of other factors, this also began to aid in the formation on this ill-fated planet of innumerable and various illnesses, which taken altogether are the chief cause of the gradual shortening of the length of the existence of these unfortunates. Well, my boy, when still in, as your contemporary favorites say, the dim ancient past, a wise and learned being, by name Amam Baklutra, also from the continent of Asia there, once clearly constated during his conscious observations of various facts proceeding around him, that this oily something which collects in the pores of the skin has also a maleficent influence on the general functioning of the whole planetary body. He began to elucidate and seek for means for wiping out at least this evil. As a result of investigations and long deliberations of this Amam Baklutra, and of several other also learned beings who then became his followers and began to help him. They arrived at the conclusion and became convinced of the impossibility of obtaining that beings similar to themselves should not wear clothes, and that it was necessary to seek a method for artificially eliminating from the pores of the skin these remains of the second food, by means of implanting in the psyche of the beings around them some or other being usage, which in the course of time would become indispensably necessary to them, and in this way enter into their habits and customs. And that these Asiatic learned beings, with this great Amam Baklutra at their head, then experimentally elucidated and actualized this in practice. Well, this served as a beginning of those hammams which exist there in places even till now. At that time, they, during the learned experiments, elucidated, among other things, that by ordinary washing, even with hot water, it was impossible to obtain the elimination of these deposits from the pores of the skin, as these excretions of the planetary body are found not on the surface of the skin, but in the depths of the pores. Their further elucidatory experiments showed them that the cleansing of the pores of the skin from these deposits was possible only by means of slow warming, thanks to which this deposited oily something acquires the possibility of gradually dissolving and of being eliminated from the pores of the skins of beings. Well, for this same purpose, they then invented and actualized in practice special rooms, which later came to be called hammams, the sense and significance of which they knew how to spread among the beings of the whole continent in such a way that in the psyche of all the Asiatic beings, the need was implanted in the process of their existence for the use of these rooms for the given procedure. Well, it is this need of going periodically to such hammams, which had already become inherent in the beings of the continent Asia, and which later passed also to the beings of this community Russia. As regards this oily something which collects in certain pores of the skin of your favorites, it is necessary further to tell you the following. As this substance, i.e. the oily something, like everything in general that exists in our great universe, cannot remain in one and the same state, therefore there inevitably proceed with these substances in these pores the processes of what are called evolution and involution required by great nature. And in consequence of the fact that during these processes from all cosmic what are called temporary and transitory arisings, there are given off what are called secondary active elements, that is, those which are temporarily crystallized by the momentum of vibrations, and which, as is known to all, have the property, when adjacent to the organ of smell of beings, of being perceived very cacophonically. Therefore, there on the planet Earth, there is always given off from your favorites who do not use the said hammams a particular rastro punilo, or as they themselves say, odor, which even they consider not altogether pleasant. And indeed, my boy, there on certain continents, particularly on the continent Europe, where the custom of going to the hammam does not obtain, it was very difficult for me as a being with a very acute sense of smell to exist among those three-brained beings on account of this specific rastro punilo, or as they sometimes call it, odor, which issues from them. This unpleasant odor which issues from those, the